Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a horror movie based on the video game series about a closed down and seemingly haunted pizzeria filled with killer animatronics. Quick disclaimer, I've never played the video games, so if you haven't either and you're wondering if this movie is worth your time, then this review is for you. That said, I did do some research on the video games and watch some playthroughs just to try and understand the how and why of the killer robots. So in this movie, we follow Mike, played by Josh Hutcherson. He is legally responsible for his little sister, but he unfortunately can't hold a job to save his life. So he resorts to taking an overnight security gig at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So he's haunted by the kidnapping of his little brother, which occurred when he was a kid, which is a very traumatizing thing for a kid to go through. But now with him being an adult and still having no motivation in life other than to solve this crime all these years later, I found was a little bit hard to believe. It's a hard thing to get over, but I just feel like most people would have gotten over it in that time. So needless to say, this movie was just filled with bad writing. Like, I actually facepalmed at times during the movie. If you've ever watched a low-budget horror movie in your life, then the tropes are gonna be all too familiar. So the way that the adults in this movie talk about Abby, the little sister, is really just a joke. Nobody in the real world would call a kid mentally ill or crazy when they're literally just being a kid. We also see people occasionally talking to themselves out loud in public, something that, none of us ever actually do. Screenwriters tend to do this because they're trying to spoon feed us what the character is thinking or feeling, as if we just couldn't have figured that out by ourselves. It's a horror movie, but this movie was not scary at all. The animatronics made it feel like if Teletubbies was a horror movie, except I think Teletubbies actually would have been creepier in a more ironic way. There were also not enough scenes of the animatronics being monsters. There were even a lot of times where they were just normal, kid-friendly robots, which was really disappointing because they should have been the star of the show. The side characters were also mostly portrayed pretty badly, some of them overacting pretty hard. At one point, they actually did that student film thing where they make an edgy character run away screaming like a little girl, thinking that we would think that that's funny, but really it was just cringe. The town, of course, only seems to have one police officer, Vanessa, who is one of the expositional plot devices of the first act. She does end up proving to be an important character, but of course, when it comes time for general police action, she is the one cop sent for the job. Overall, this movie just felt like a cliche network television show turned into a lackluster horror movie. It was not scary at all, nor was it compelling in the least in its performances or story. Again, I've never played the video games, so maybe for those of you who have, or those of you who really enjoyed watching the playthroughs on YouTube, you might recognize something good in this movie that I didn't see. But for someone like myself who just isn't a part of that world, there was nothing redeemable about this movie. It was just terrible. That's not to say that it was the worst movie I've ever seen, but I will certainly be forgetting about this movie by next week. For those of you who like the video games and were already excited about this movie before clicking this video, you might still find some enjoyment in it. But for the rest of you, I just can't recommend watching it. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you next week with my reviews of David Fincher's The Killer and The Marsh King's Daughter.